There's something somewhat poetic, maybe in a sad way for Barca supporters, that the man who was an expensive replacement to Neymar is leaving Barca for the same club via a release clause that has some shocking confusion surrounding it. Almost 6 years to the day, in fact, as Neymar's transfer was officially announced on August 3rd, 2017. Maybe there was some relief involved, as Dembele's seemingly imminent departure for Paris finally closes the chapter on the disastrous reinvestment of the Neymar funds. Maybe there's relief on Dembele's end as well, in a sort of forgive but never forget for the treatment he received from Barcelona in January of 2022. Whichever way you slice it, Dembele's departure has been as chaotic and confusing as the entirety of his career in Catalonia, where controversies and disappointments were sandwiched between moments of genuine, match-winning brilliance. Hey guys, I'm Adrian and welcome back to Rabona TV. If you're new here, then thanks for joining us, and hey, consider subscribing, man. We put out 2 videos and some short-form content every single week. Explainers on certain events in the football world, player profiles, and more. And let's check in on Adrian's unique kit collection, as today we have a very unique one. Highlanders FC from Zimbabwe, a club founded all the way back in 1926. The design on this one, truly unique, just like all of the rare and unique official kits you can find on Sangalo. Thanks Sangalo for hooking me up with this one, as every kit you guys have sent me has not only filled up my collection with unique pieces, but it's great to learn about these clubs I would never have read about before. And if you want to find some rare kits from lesser known clubs from around the world, then you need to check out Sangalo, the coolest kit shop around right now. Vietnam, India, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Bhutan, and more. Some amazing kits out there on Sangalo. Do check them out with the link in the description and use the promo code RABONATV for 10% off of your order. Thanks Sangalo, and let's get into this. We all know the Neymar story by now and his reasons for ditching a great thing at FC Barcelona for the City of Lights. Something, sick of Messi's shadow, something, destined to win Ballon d'Or without Messi in the way, etc, etc, etc. As mentioned in the intro, Neymar's release clause of 222 million euros was triggered by PSG, bringing the Brazilian to the club for what would be seen as a, well, insane fee. The most expensive transfer of all time to this day. Where Neymar went to PSG to put on some brilliant displays, he still missed around 50% of matches for the Parisians. And Barcelona sought to replace Neymar with Phil Coutinho in that same summer of 2017. That didn't happen, not until January of 2018 actually. So in his stead, they brought in a supremely talented French winger, Ousmane Dembele of Borussia Dortmund. At this time, Dembele had just 2 seasons of senior football under his belt. 1 season at Stade Rennais, which led to Borussia Dortmund signing him, and Dembele having a stunning first season in Germany where his partnership with Aubameyang, as well as his ability to score himself with either foot, brought a ton of goals to Dortmund and led to the rest of Europe buzzing about his potential. So, suddenly flush with more cash than they knew what to do with, Barcelona rolled out the red carpet for a deal of around 140 million euros for the then 20-year-old Ousmane Dembele. I don't think anyone really looked at the price for Dembele and thought, yeah, that's totally normal. I think it was always seen as an incredibly expensive gamble, given he'd shown a ton of potential in the 2 seasons in the top flights of France and Germany. But potential is simply that, potential, not a guarantee of anything. To be fair to Dembele, when he's been healthy and in form, he's looked like an absolute world beater. The kind of player that fullbacks would be tossing and turning at night at the thought of having to face him the next day. He had vision, he had pace, he had the ability to dribble past anyone, and his 2-footedness meant that he could cut to either side and provide a threat with his final ball or finish. That's nightmare stuff for defenders. That is, when he was on the pitch, which was a rarity in his first few... Well, I think it's fair to say that it was a rarity in the entirety of his Barcelona career. According to Transfermarkt's injury records, so you can give or take a few matches, but they are mostly accurate. But according to their records, he has failed to make Barca's squad due to injury for 119 matches. 119 matches, that is the equivalent of 3 full La Liga seasons. That's not great value for money. And if you really want it to hit home, The Athletic's Paul Ballas actually compared Neymar and Dembele's time at Barcelona, writing the following. During 6 seasons with Barcelona, the Frenchman has made fewer appearances than Neymar did in his 4 seasons, 185 to 186. He has scored 40 goals and provided 43 assists. Neymar registered 105 and 76. So 2 more seasons than Neymar had, 1 less appearance than Neymar, 65 fewer goals and 34 fewer assists. Now that we know the real cost of Neymar's transfer was more like 86 million rather than the 57 they originally announced, that means that for about 60 million more euros for Dembele, they got a lot less out of him. Hence, the gamble that we spoke of earlier didn't pay off. The injuries have been nightmarish for him, and at one point, his teammates such as Piqué and Luis Suarez questioned his commitment and professionalism, thinking that he wasn't doing all that he could to stay healthy at one point, with Piqué famously saying, quote, "We were also young, and we have also committed mistakes. From experience, we have to help him to understand that football is a 24-hour job, and he has to live accordingly. I'm convinced that he's going to improve in this respect, and that decisions like the one the coach took will help him." For context, that came after Dembele was left out of Barcelona squad after not showing up to training a few days before their match against Betis in 2018, and he didn't tell the club where he was. There was quite the back and forth between Barcelona and Dembele. Frustrations that their expensive acquisition was constantly injured would have spurred this, with the sheer number of injuries stoking the suspicions within the club that Dembele's focus wasn't on getting back to football. Whether that was fair or unfair to say, I don't know, but that's what was rumored by sources close to the club. What made it all the more frustrating for Barcelona was that in the rare moments that he was healthy and found some form, he was a devastating attacker. But with another injury and his contract winding down, there was seemingly a disconnect between Barcelona's executives and the coaching staff. In January of 2022, with Barcelona fully in their precarious state financially, Mateu Alemany gave a famous interview to Barca's official channels, man. This was posted by the club, of Alemany saying, essentially, I don't need to break it down actually. It's clear as day. Hear from the man himself. Quote, "We've talked and talked, made various offers. We've tried to find a way, but these offers have been systemically rejected by his agents. It seems obvious he does not want to continue at Barca and is not committed to Barca's future project. In this scenario, he and his agents have been informed that he must leave immediately because we want players committed to this project, and therefore, we hope a transfer will take place before January 31st. On the football side, the result is we do not want to have players who are not committed to Barca. The club is obviously not the one that should decide this. It's the coach, and he has, but he has all our support. It seems to us absolutely the correct approach." So Alemany said that Xavi had made the decision. That's interesting to note for the future. Clear as day, like I said, and at first, Xavi was with the club, at least publicly, as he agreed with the club's course of action, saying, quote, "We're in a position which we have to stop this right now. Either he renews or we will look for an exit for him. In the end, the club has decided that if he doesn't renew, we have to seek a solution. We have to do what's best for the club. It's 5 months now that Mateu Alemany has been talking to him and his representatives. I have been very honest with him. It's not an easy situation. It doesn't feel good, but the club's interests have to come first. This case is very complex, and we have reached a point where we have to decide. The player has to think about the club a bit. He knows what the project is. I couldn't have put more trust in him." To this, Dembele and his camp responded by saying, quote, "I will not allow anyone to give the impression that I am not involved in the sports project. I will not allow anyone to speak for me or my representative, whom I fully trust. Still under contract, I am fully involved and at the disposal of my club, my coach. I have always given everything for my colleagues and also for all the club members. I am not going to change that now. I am not a man who cheats, and still less a man who has the habit of giving in to blackmail." And from there, it became a bit strange. After this public dispute and claims of blackmail, Xavi then put the sporting interests, perhaps not the financial interests, but the sporting interests of the club at the forefront, warmed to Dembele, and began getting some great performances out of him. He kind of needed to do this though, didn't he? And it was a great call by Xavi, as Dembele played his best football for Barcelona in that season and a half, contributing to their successful reconquering of La Liga, playing an integral role. Well, he was injured from January to the end of April of last season, so he played a big role, but with some Dembelisms, some Dembelishment in there as well, hanging out with the medical staff.
Vamos, Jordi! Vamos, Dembele!
Those hamstrings are as strong as that spaghetti that you overboiled the other night. Shame on you, man. Just set a damn timer. Despite everything that happened in the 2021-22 season, Dembele signed a new contract with Barcelona in July of 2022 for 2 seasons, while taking a pay cut, but there was a little surprise in that contract for everyone also. If you were following this Dembele madness, then perhaps you would have been as confused as me as to what exactly a private clause was, as Fabrizio Romano wrote. Honestly, nobody on Twitter could explain it to me either, so I figured fine, I'll sort it out myself instead of being lazy and crowdsourcing information. While Dembele was playing quite well for Barca during their preseason, including that lovely goal against Real Madrid and Barcelona's 3-0 win stateside, it became known that PSG were going to go for Ousmane Dembele via a release clause. I say a release clause rather than the release clause because the aforementioned private clause comes into play here. It's not actually called a private clause. With Dembele's normal release clause, the kind you're already very much familiar with, a club would have to pay up to 100 million euros in order to trigger it. However, Dembele has another release clause, a transfer obligation clause, that essentially ensured that should someone bid 50 million euros for Dembele prior to July 31st, 2023, and Dembele approves of the club and the move, Barcelona have to accept it. They legally have no other choice but to accept it. And on top of that, it gets even better for Ousmane Dembele. Not only did that clause make him a tantalizing proposition for interested clubs, but Dembele would receive 50% of the transfer fee, 25 million for Dembele and his boys, 25 million for Barcelona. That contract renewal that he signed was absolutely a masterstroke from Dembele's camp. Sure, he would take a pay cut for this contract, which favored Barcelona and was helpful for them given their financial issues, but it also ensured that he held all of the power for his future. Not to mention the 25 million euros is a nice little nest egg, don't you think? I imagine you could survive with that kind of payout. Where the normal release clause of 100 million would have required the player himself to show up to the La Liga offices, to pay his clause, to annul the contract, etc., this transfer obligation clause just means that Barca have to accept any offer of 50 million, so long as it came before midnight on July 31st, 2023, which PSG's offer did so, as they communicated they were going to pay the clause on Saturday, July 29th, 2023. Now, it should be noted that as part of this clause, Barcelona still has 3 weeks to get the deal done, in essence, to release the player to PSG. In that 3 weeks, they could potentially renegotiate with Dembele, but Dembele has already stated his intent to go to PSG. So they seem resigned to losing him. There are a few ways to look at this situation, depending on whether you want to be a glass half full or half empty kind of guy or gal. There are some who point out that Barcelona were very close to losing him for free last summer, as his previous contract had expired, and then he renewed with Barcelona with this fantastic contract that was weighed heavily in his favor. I mean, take notes, Charlie and Harry Kane. This is how you do it. So yeah, you can definitely see this as a glass half full kind of way. Where they could have received nothing, they're likely going to get about 25 million for a player who, from what we've seen, is almost guaranteed to have a lengthy injury layoff at least once per season. Sorry, I'm not being cynical or negative. That's just the facts, man. That's the reality. Then there's the glass half empty view, where you take into consideration Barcelona's financial state currently. 25 million euros helps, yes, but it's still difficult, maybe even nearly impossible to find a player of Dembele's level for somewhere in that region. Maybe impossible is a bad word here, as sometimes new signings of lesser known quantities can play out of their socks and surprise you. But as a general rule, finding a player of Dembele's quality for less than 50 million in this market, That's a huge challenge. Not taking his injuries into account here, Barcelona were getting an incredible deal as they were getting Ousmane Dembele, but the wages probably weren't anywhere close to where they should have been when you, again, ignore his injuries and look at his ability on face value. In fact, the contract offer that Barcelona had for Dembele would have finally moved him up to one of the top 4 earners in the club. That's how far down the list was with his reduced salary from his July 2022 contract. Xavi was asked of this situation, and he said, quote, "It's a shame. We had taken great care of him to ensure he was happy here. I knew all about the clause. Alemany and I have been together day and night, and we knew there was a chance he would go. But he seemed happy to me. I didn't expect it, but it has happened. At the end of the day, it's a scenario we have prepared for, and now we have to strengthen because it weakens us." And here's Adrian's tinfoil hat speculative take. So take this with the tiniest grain of salt. But I think that this was always the plan from Dembele's side, where it seemed like he had disastrous representation back in January given the demands his camp had of a 40 million euro per season salary, etc. Ultimately, they've played Barcelona like a fiddle. Make the comments and actions of Alemany, etc. from January 2022 seem like water under the bridge. Speak publicly of how happy you are at the club. Play under Xavi and show your best side. Only for you to later get one over Barcelona with the 50-50 split of the 50 million euro transfer fee that they have to accept. He stuck around. He proved his worth with great performances in the 22-23 season. And then his agent likely notified every big club saying, "Hey, you know, my client has this transfer obligation clause in his contract. You could have him for about 50 million euros so long as you state your intent to Barcelona prior to August 1st. Could be a good deal for everyone involved, etc., etc." And PSG was the team that jumped on it. That's what I see as the reality, but like I said, that's just speculation, so don't quote that as fact. Overall, despite taking a huge loss here, perhaps Barcelona will be happy to put this in the past. Sure, they would have been happier with Dembele staying and contributing to their success for another season, but now they can finally put the Neymar cash and all of the negatives that came with it via Dembele and Coutinho well and truly in the past. Or maybe they're fuming and crying into their pillows at night. I have no idea. But that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to let me know what you think of this situation. Give me your take on this debacle. And hey, subscribe if you're new. My name's Adrian. This is Rabona TV. And thanks for watching. Ciao.